Well, happy Friday, everyone, and welcome in. My name's Bryce Koon, and it's Friday morning. It's time to talk college football, and we're here on Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth, Section 103. We do a lot of great things. Let's lock it in. Let's have a great Friday. Ralph, hit the button.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Welcome in. Welcome in. Hey, the reason we're doing this live on a Friday morning, it's 11 o'clock Central Time. Well, it's 11:21 Central Time, I should say. My camera is just bugging out on me here. What's happening? Had a crazy week. So we really haven't been able to dive into the Georgia Tech content as much as we would. So I'll talk a little bit of everything. I'll talk about a lot of things. It's 11:30 Eastern, so this is really primarily for people to be able to watch, people to hang out, maybe watch in the evening, watch in the afternoon, watch before the game tomorrow, and we'll do that. 10:22 Central is the time. I have no clue, Maxwell. I don't know what time it is anywhere or everywhere, but we're going to get ready. We're going to talk a little Georgia Tech football here on a Friday morning. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're on Twitter watching, head over to the YouTube channel at The Crowded Booth, and we'll do a lot of different things, and we'll love to hear from you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what happened and where is Georgia Tech entering this week. Let's start here. This has been a much talked about conversation, completely an overblown conversation, I think, that we've kind of had. What was my opinion of what happened last Saturday? I'll just quickly graze over that. I'll give you 3 keys to a Georgia Tech win and then my prediction about this. I think that we saw a good Georgia Tech team play last Saturday. Georgia State was, I think, better than people maybe thought, and did some good things. It showed and exposed some things that really didn't get shown against Florida State. Their offense kind of drove the ball. Florida State drove the ball at times, but Georgia State was a solid opponent. Showed some things on film that Brent Key and the company can get back to, and they obviously worked on this past week. This is kind of how I think about it. I didn't think it was a dominant effort in terms of what we saw down in Auburn, what we saw over in Oxford with Ole Miss. What I did think was the team taking care of business. The game was never in doubt and able to go win a football game like they should. They handled business. That's what that is. And good win, 2-0, rolling into the second ACC game at 3-0. So that's kind of my take on what happened last Saturday. Now, we were in the building. It was fun. It's a good time. We enjoyed it once again. Shout out to everyone who hung out at the tailgate. That was an awesome time. It brings me to this week, and I always had this game circled, when the schedule was released as a potential swing game. 2 weeks in, I do agree. I mean, I do think that Georgia Tech, and I'll kind of spoil my pick a little bit. I do think Georgia Tech should win this game. I think they're a little more experienced. I do think that the continuity factor is something that we're seeing just kind of manifest itself and be a real threat to other teams. But this is going to be a fun game. And before I kind of get into the keys, I did want to say this. I think this is going to be one of the more underrated battles in terms of quarterback play that we've seen so far this season. Kyle McCord had a great game. Syracuse's offense was excellent last week. You look at what they were able to do last week out there. I mean, McCord looked really, really good. And I think overall, when you talk about what has to happen in this game, McCord against King is going to be a really, really fun matchup. These guys are going to have to match each other. Is one quarterback going to have to mount a late drive to be able to be successful at some point in this game? So I'm excited to watch that. We talked about that on last night's college football show, kind of towards the tail end of it. This is a good opportunity for Georgia Tech to go on the road. Obviously, the thumbnail says Road Warriors. Brent Key's been very good on the road in ACC play throughout his short tenure at Georgia Tech. So all of those things. You can't always go off of history, but this is a common theme that we're starting to see. Georgia Tech's pretty good on the road, and so you're going to go play in that stadium. It's going to be very, very interesting. I don't know what Ralph just put in the chat. I have no idea why that's there, but it is what it is. So I like this matchup for Georgia Tech, and let's kind of get into my 3 keys about what I could see in this ball game. All right, let's go. Let's rock and roll. Key number 1, establish the run early. Ralph's got it on the screen, and let's talk about it. This is a foregone conclusion. I'm going to go back to a couple stats I got here over on the handy-dandy iPad. Georgia Tech's ground game is averaging 198 yards per game. Let's just round that up to 200. They averaged 198 last year. They're up to 208 after the first 2 games this season. And I really do believe this is a game where you go back and look at, what Syracuse struggled with against Ohio. It was the run game. They ranked 67th nationally last season, and they allowed 255 yards in the ground against the Bobcats last week. This is one where if you can establish the run game early and often, you get not only just Jamal Haynes, but obviously a couple other backs. And, hey, this might be a Chad Alexander talk show. And Haynes King as well. You get those guys kind of in a rhythm about what they can maybe do and start to establish that the offensive line gets into a rhythm, wanting and needing to get that push. Now you're talking about, hey, you can control the tempo, you can control what you want to do, and you win the battle of the controllables. That's, I think, what determines the winner and the loser of a football game. The controllable factors, who's going to win that battle? If Georgia Tech establishes the run here early on, I think that is a massive, massive win in terms of what they can control. So, Syracuse's rush and run defense was not good last week. That's something I think Georgia Tech could capitalize on. Georgia Tech, one of the best running teams in the country last year, carrying over. It looks like that could be the case this season. Can they keep that up on the road? So that's key number 1. Establish that run early. I know Trey Cooley, not really going to play. Do other guys have to step up and make their presence felt? Chad Alexander is a guy that this staff and Norval McKenzie are really liking and really counting on to be a piece, not just a body, but a piece to the puzzle for this Jackets offense. So that's key number 1. Establish the run early. All right, let's move on to key number 2. And Ralph, you can start a couple comments if you want. Hit on explosive plays. Like this is something for me in this game because Will mentioned this last night in the cultural show. He said this could turn into a rock fight in so many words. And it could. It definitely could. If Georgia Tech can hit on explosive plays against this defense, it's not only just going to open the run game, but it's going to allow Haynes King to get into a rhythm. All quarterbacks are really based off of what they can do in terms of rhythm. I think Haynes King maybe more than others. When you see him start to feel comfortable and get into a flow of the game and start to dictate the flow of the game, that's when he's uber successful. So can you hit on explosive plays? If you're going to run the ball 3 yards here, 4 or 5 yards here, and then you use Malik Rutherford, who had a great game against Georgia State last week, on a deep post. You use Eric Singleton on that crossing route. You use not Brett Scyther, not playing this season, but you use some other tight ends that can you do different things. Avery Boyd, a guy that is kind of emerging as a target for this offense. Chase Lane, the whole list of weapons you have. If they really can open this thing up offensively, they should be able to win comfortably because I don't know if Syracuse's defense can account for all the different factors that Georgia Tech has on the field. So hit on explosive plays. When the opportunity is there, you have to hit on those right there. Combine that with the run game, and I think that's a recipe for success for this offense heading on the road. This should be a fairly competitive football game. I think their crowd is going to be really into it. How do you manage that? How do you manage the success of what you've been able to do? Because through 2 weeks of college football, week 0 and week 1, heading here into week 2, Georgia Tech's one of those teams that's pretty clean throughout the first 2 weeks, especially in the ACC. So this is a really, really big opportunity to start out 2-0 in the conference. So would love to see that happen. All right, let's get to point 3. Key number 3. You've hit on explosive plays. You got to establish the run game. You got to get to Kyle McCord. Let's go back to what Kyle McCord did so well. Just was clean in the pocket, was really able to make some plays. And I think the narrative on McCord has been somewhat misconstrued. He was at one of the current blue bloods last season, and he was a really good football player for Ohio State, but by their standard and what they needed to capture a national title and beat Michigan, that wasn't enough. Now he takes a proverbial step down, but when you look at Syracuse, this is a guy who I think can excel in the ACC. He can be a nice football player. He can be a nice complementary, a point guard of sorts, facilitator, and he did that against Ohio. Very, very clean game. Through the whole game. So I really do like the way Kyle McCord plays. That's why I said I'm intrigued in one of the positions I'm going to be watching is the quarterback battle, like King versus McCord. That's going to be very interesting. But you got to get to him. And we saw this against Florida State. They got to DJU a couple of times, and even if the sack number wasn't there, they were able to rush a throw or rush a progression or something like that. I don't think they did it as well necessarily against Georgia State. Georgia State ran the ball as Georgia State has done the past couple of years, and you know I do believe that when you look and see what Syracuse brings to the table offensively, that offensive line, their run game, it's going to be interesting. He threw for 354 and 4 touchdown passes. You got to keep an eye out on Aronde Gadsden, who had 7 receptions for 108 and a touchdown. They've got some weapons. Young, maybe you don't know the names, but if you can get to Kyle McCord and you can force him into some bad decisions or force him to make that throw earlier than he wants, get him off of his timing, that's a recipe for success for this defense. I, through 2 games, have been very, very pleased. Outside of maybe 1 or 2 plays in the Georgia State game, very, very pleased with the way the secondary has played. Ralph's in the background. Will is, watching. All 3 of us have been very impressed with the way that Mamari Harvey has played. Like, he has played through 2 games like a guy who could be all ACC first or second team at the end of the season. Knack for knowing where the football is going to go. Sticky against the receivers. He's not allowing there's not a lot of 3 or 4 or 5 yards off of the receiver that's allowing them that kind of halo to be able to go catch the football. So I really, really like the way they've played. You have Harvey, Rodney Shelley, which, look, I told you in spring ball, told you in summer, told you in fall camp, Rodney Shelley is a guy that we need to keep an eye on. You can kind of tell he's starting to maybe build up some confidence in terms of knowing what he needs to do on the football field. So when he knows, he's got the athletic ability to be able to do things. So when he has a great understanding of the concept that this defense wants to run and how they want to do things and the communication on the back end, I think he's going to be a good football player for this team. LaMiles Brooks has been the X factor, I think, for this defense on the back end. He's a guy that has come off the field in third down situations when they get to a Tay Seymour who offers some athletic upside there at the position. But that 3 safety rotation between Brooks, Clayton Powell-Lee, and Tay Seymour, I think, has been phenomenal throughout the first 2 games. Can they keep that up against a quarterback that this is going to be the best quarterback they've faced through 2 games? If the pocket is clean, he's going to be able to do some things, especially with some talent they have at the running back and the wide receiver and the tight end position. So that, for me, has to be a key here defensively. So I thought I was going to sneeze there, Ralph. Thought I was going to sneeze there for a second. Amari Harvey and Romello Hyde are former Auburn players who currently play at Georgia Tech. Ralph helping out Will. You got to get to Kyle McCord. This is a game where if this defense can feast, that's going to be very interesting. And kind of to that point, play assignment sound, gap integrity type of football. Linebackers need to be filling the gaps correctly. We've seen Kyle Leaford, in just a couple of snaps against Georgia State, he was out of position. A couple snaps against Florida State, he was out of position. But for the most part, I would say around 60, 70% of the time, Eford's has been in the right place at the right time. When you look at the linebacker position in general, Tre'Nayus Tatum kind of playing, to me, that flowing off-ball player that we saw a couple of years ago. I think you really start to see what Georgia Tech had with Ace Ely and Charlie Thomas. Eford kind of being that calming presence in the middle. And then you have Tre'Nayus Tatum being kind of that free-flowing playmaking type of linebacker that they love to have. And even in a change of defense, they still kind of have that same personnel. So can you play gap sound football, assignment sound football, stay within your gap integrity, And here's something else, and this might fire Ralph up um, back in the studio. We'll call that behind the scenes in the studio. One thing I'm going to be watching in this game, because Georgia State was able to have some success against this, is can the defensive linemen hold their ground? And if you've got the B gap, the A gap, can you stick in that spot and not get pushed off of your spot? That's something for me is going to be very interesting in this game, because if Syracuse gets the run game going, it's going to open up the pass. So for guys in that defensive line, Zeke Biggers, Micaiah Scott, Horace Lockett, Thomas Gore, Jordan Vandenberg, like these guys that are kind of playing a mix of, Micaiah Scott's played outside a little bit. They've utilized him across, the front. But I do believe that when you look at kind of the guys who are making up that interior of the defensive line, this is a game where it's going to be very important for you to hold your ground, to hold your spot, to not let yourself get washed down the line or moved into another gap, because you're going to need to fill those. You're going to need to be able to play, like I said, assignment sound, gap integrity type of football. So I think this has the potential. And Ralph, you can get off key number 3, and we'll go into that final predictions. Shorter show, but we're live here on a Friday morning. Final prediction. Per Bet Online, I believe this game is still sitting at, and Ralph, you can fact check me here. I believe this game is still sitting at around 3.5 in favor of Georgia Tech. Ralph put in the Discord earlier, if Georgia Tech was +3 heading this game, he'd hammer it. I'm not touching this game. I'll say that. It makes me a little nervous to touch this game. But this is a game that I think Georgia Tech should win. And it's a game, Ralph, just put in the private chat. I can't. Is it still -3? Okay, so Georgia Tech -3 on the road. Which, I'm new to the scene. That means it's really kind of Georgia Tech -6. And you get 3 points for being at home, right? If you're Syracuse. Isn't that what that means? Doesn't the home team usually get 3 points? He says he doesn't know. I thought that. See, that's how much I know about it. Yeah, that is what it is. Ralph says in the private chat sometimes, so we don't know in this game. Not betting the game, you must think Syracuse is going to win and Tech stinks. Yeah, that's what we think. That's obviously what I think. So, where do I sit in this game? I think this game Georgia Tech should win. The biggest question mark on the field for me is going to be Syracuse's run defense, which is against probably the biggest strength for Georgia Tech in their run offense. I think that's a battle that Georgia Tech's going to be able to win handily. I think Haynes King is going to make a couple plays. I saw a comment, a Syracuse podcaster said that Haynes King wasn't a mobile quarterback. I don't know. I have zero clue. Yeah, Alex says, I saw a Syracuse podcaster said Haynes King isn't a mobile QB, which helps them. That one guy's for a rude awakening. I genuinely think that you would have to have never watched a Georgia Tech game ever to think that. That's exactly what the definition of he is as a dual threat mobile quarterback. So I think Georgia Tech wins this game. I'm going to go with a final score 34-23. I think Georgia Tech covers this spread. I'm not putting money on it. I think offensively they can open things up. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game in the first half. Both teams kind of battling a little bit of a grudge match. Two I don't want to say immovable forces because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here between two ACC teams, but I do think this is two teams that are going to be in a rock fight to begin with, but 34-23 is where I'm going. Georgia Tech wins this football game. Maybe they're leading 27-23 with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And, you're sitting there in a situation where Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, this team, guts out a 6-minute drive, 6 minutes, in 12 plays, 73 yards to put them up 34-23 and put this game on ice and get back to Atlanta. The key for a Syracuse upset is that passing game. If that passing game gets going, if Kyle McCord's kept clean, that's where I think this defense could get in trouble, as could any defense. McCord's a solid quarterback, and he's going to be able to make some plays. Who makes the most plays? Who doesn't have the self-inflicted, mistakes? Penalties have to be cleaned up in this game for Georgia Tech, too. That's another key, for this. Georgia Tech has to clean up the penalty side of things. I know a lot of people said in that Georgia State game the penalties were egregious. Here's what I'll say this. In terms of the offensive line holding penalties, went back and watched it. I think Georgia State was a little bit faster getting out to the edge, and what that resulted in is offensive linemen kind of all they could do was hold a couple of times. Now, it did get a little repetitive to where I think some of those were questionable calls, but for a base level, you have to keep the penalties down. So to me, I think Georgia Tech wins this game 34-23, 3-0 on the season, 2-0 in ACC play. And look, it sets you up to go play VMI. You know, you get to go play VMI, and you win that game. You're 4-0, 2-0 in the ACC. You're creeping into that top 20. And look, we all talk about this. It sets up for a potential showdown in Louisville against two potentially undefeated teams, a top 20 matchup, which that should warrant at least ACC huddle being there. I don't think College Game Day would be there, but it's going to be fun. Now, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, both those teams are undefeated going into that game. That's a serious conversation. But hey, thanks so much for watching live here on a Friday. We had to get this content in, and we wanted to as well. So a couple things for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're watching on Twitter, which I know a lot of you are, make sure you check us out over there too. We will be probably doing a live reaction show tomorrow post game. I got to see how the time is going to work out that. So we'll probably be either live tomorrow or Sunday evening talking about this game. Going to be a lot of fun. I think this could be a very, very fun game. I think it could. It's two quarterbacks that I think are underrated on the national stage and has a chance to showcase two teams with two relatively young head coaches that could be the next wave of the ACC. And I like where Syracuse is. I'm just going to tell you that. I like where they're recruiting. I like how they're building their program. But I do think Georgia Tech has the edge here. Like I said, 34-23. Going to be a lot of fun. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk. Ralph's out of here. Will's out of here. We will see you potentially on Saturday post-game. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, set up those notifications so you know when we go live. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.